And welcome to Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin. My guest today, who's from Georgia in the US, is one of the world's most popular and acclaimed crime writers. She's the author of more than 20 New York Times best-selling novels, published in over 120 countries. Her first novel, Blindsighted, was published in 27 languages and made the Crime Writers Association Daggers Award shortlist for Best Thriller Debut. That was back in 2001. Her work's been adapted for the screen, including Pieces of Her, starring Toni Collette, and Will Trent, which has amassed millions of viewers around the globe. Outside of her literary work, she's the founder of the Save the Libraries Project, a non-profit organisation established to support libraries and library programming. Her new book is We Are All Guilty Here. It's a new series set in a new town with new characters and grim cases. Two girls go missing and it's up to Officer Emmy Clifton to find them. But as Clifton combs through the lives of the two girls, she realises that no one knows them. Not really. Karin Slaughter, welcome to Meet the Writers.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you here. You are such a huge name in crime writing, and we love a great thriller here at Meet the Writers. You're from Covington in Georgia. Tell us about that.
Well, that's a deep dive. Yeah, well, it's a very small town. When I was born there, there's not really a lot of small towns in proximity to Atlanta anymore because everybody's gone to the suburbs. But it was a very tiny town, and we moved to a bigger one, which would still be considered tiny by most measures, called Jonesboro. And we went back and forth to visit family and that sort of thing. But I really grew up knowing the joy of being in a small town, but also the strictures and the knowing that you know people, but you don't really know them, and everybody talking about your business, but no one really understanding it.
I was driving through Georgia recently and some adjoining states, and I was really struck, and this is just obviously from the highway, but of so many billboards, all advertising. It was just pre-election, all advertising either a political candidate or some kind of church, and there was sort of such a mix of religions and politics, and then the odd pretty rundown store and a lot of strip malls. Yeah. That's what you get from the highway. What is small town like, though, beyond that?
Well, I'm surprised you didn't mention the truck stop strip clubs also.
True.
We
didn't actually stop at those.
Oh, okay. Sure. My favorite is one in the North Georgia mountains. There's a place called Drug and Gun. And their tagline is pistols and Prozac. So you go in and you can get your pharmacy prescription filled, but you could also buy a Ruger if you wanted. Yeah, it is a really weird mixture. There's a lot of religion. There's not a lot of people following religion. There's a lot of policing of your neighbors, but what you do is allegedly your own business. And, it's interesting to me because a lot of small towns are the places where really horrific crimes happen. And it's a great thing for a crime writer to be familiar with those landscapes, particularly in the South.
Why do you think small towns foster that kind of behavior?
Well, it's the sense that you know everybody, and so people come and they hide in plain sight. You don't often hear about serial killers going to large cities. I mean, obviously there are certain types of serial killers in New York or Los Angeles and places like that, but they stick to areas where people will trust them.
That's so interesting. Now, you studied literature at Georgia State University, and I wonder what it was that drove you to do that. When did you know that literature was your love?
Well, from a very early age, I was really interested in writing and reading, and I was the only person in my family who loved reading, and my dad made sure I was at the library every Saturday so I could pick out the books I like and sit in the air conditioning and read, and I could take home whatever I wanted. So it was very important to me being immersed in literature. It was kind of an escape because I was a very strange little girl in a small town who didn't really fit in and had unusual interest in a very strange, dark sense of humor for a 6-year-old. And books were my escape, and they were my pleasure and my great joy. And I was very fortunate. In the United States, our public school systems are not that great right now, but I had some amazing teachers who were people who loved language and literature and who taught me to love not just reading, but the precision of words and how you can use them to convey feeling and emotion and manipulate people a bit. And I love that idea.
I just want to unpack this idea of this strange 6-year-old who it seems to me could either have been a sociopath or written about
Yes.
them. But what did your family do there?
Well, I wrote little books starting at the age of 6 about my sisters being murdered or mutilated or kidnapped or, anything that made me an only child. And there wasn't really a story arc because the crimes were never solved. The happy ending was I was an only child. And my dad would give me a quarter every time I wrote these. He still has some of them. I think that's his retirement plan. But I just, that kind of stuff. And I was always getting in trouble at school for very weird things. Like I had a picture of Marilyn Monroe after the autopsy on my lunchbox. And I thought I was making an important statement on how beauty is fleeting. Mm-hmm. And my dad there was a whole conference with the principal about this. And my dad finally said, she's weird. And she's done shit like this all her life, and we love her. So just stop calling me up here for it because she's going to keep doing it.
Fantastic that you got that amount of support from home. You go off to university, but you don't graduate. Why is that?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, I was a really bad student. I only wanted to take English classes, and I never believed in being a starving artist. As supportive as my dad was, when I graduated high school, he said, I believe in you and you can do anything you want, but you can't live at home. So I had to get a job, and I was going to school at night and working during the day. And I started my own company. I had a sign business, and the sign business was taking off, and I was doing pretty well financially. And I thought, wow, what am I doing in college, taking these classes on Spencer, which I loved, but it's exhausting, and I should be focusing on this sign business and making money and starting my career. And also, for me, not for everybody, obviously, but being in college is the only time that I stopped writing. And I stopped reading for pleasure. And it really was not for me. But I will say, if you're going to drop out of college, make sure you write a New York Times bestselling novel, because that's the best revenge.
Absolutely. So many things to unpack there. A sign business?
Yes.
Yeah.
So for sale by owner, or neon signs, or I drove a forklift. I did all kinds of crazy things. But I lived a life, and I think that's really important for writers. I'm reading the Mark Twain biography, which surprisingly not such a great guy. But it's really interesting, the many different jobs he did and how he was just fascinated by the process of these different jobs, like a typesetter. Or he got Mark Twain, obviously, from being a riverboat captain. And, so I think that writers in general are just interested in a hell of a lot of things, and our lives reflect that.
Absolutely. So you say, jokingly, write a New York Times bestseller. Not so easy. And what's weird is you wrote it in, 3 months?
I did, yeah. So I got to a point where I thought, you have this sign business, and you're going to be running a sign company for the rest of your life, and that's not really what you want to do. And I was 28. I thought 30 was really old. And I said to myself, if you're not published by the time you're 30, then you're never going to get published, which, was stupid, but I just told myself that. And so I sold my business to a friend. I worked for him in exchange for taking a drastic pay cut, which people said was crazy. And I just had to bet on myself and take the safety net away. And so I would get up in the morning and I would write, and then I would go to work, and then I would come home and write. And so I had this finite amount of time to do these things. And I had actually written another novel that was historical fiction. Being from the South, I thought I had to write another Gone with the Wind. And there's a reason why no one has really successfully done it. And so it got rejected. And my agent said to me, what do you want to do now? And I said, I've always wanted to write a thriller. And I had this 3 months of time I could cobble together. And I did, and I wrote Blindsided.
And what's interesting is you already had an agent?
I did. I got her with the historical novel. And the thing is, I said to her, I want to see all these rejections that I got from these editors. And she was very wary because she thought I was going to write to them and tell them they were idiots, right? Which they were. But what they all said was, we love the voice, we love the assurance, the self-assurance in voice, but the story isn't working for us. And that was very encouraging to me because it made me want to keep writing.
Now, it's incredibly unusual for a debut novel to be that successful. Aside from the quality of writing, what do you think drove that?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One is what we started talking about, which is the small town experience. I think everyone relates to that. Even in a city like New York, people think of where they live in terms of neighborhoods. No one says, I live in New York City. It's like the Upper West Side or Chelsea or the Village, and that's kind of their identity. It's the same in Atlanta. We have a place called Buckhead, and we know if you're from Buckhead, you're either a rap star, an athlete, or you come from incredibly old money that's been there forever. So it's a strange mixture of people, but you can usually peg which one they are. And so I think that small town thing is an ideal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that belonging and the familiarity of it. But I also think it's voice, because I'm writing about what a lot of people are writing about. And Claire McIntosh or me or Lee Child, or we're all writing about bad things happening, and then they're solved by the end. And what we bring to it is our experience and our eye for detail and our approach to the story. And I just felt really lucky that I was published at a time, particularly as a woman, where they were interested in reading about these crimes that historically happen to women from a woman's perspective.
Because you go into the victims and really let us understand who they were as people. It's not just something horrific happening to a woman. We really understand who she was. Now, the timing of this was just extraordinary because it was published 2 days after 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, which might be enough to scupper anything at all.
Well, the thing is, every author who had a book published and was ready to go, I was packed, ready to go on my first book tour, and it was 30 days. There used to be that many bookstores around the country that you could do a 30-day book tour. And my publisher said, we understand if you want to cancel. And I said, no, I want to do this. And it just seemed the biggest, here's a stick in your eye to the terrorists, for a woman to be single and traveling around the country on her own and talking about books that discuss very female-oriented stories and about crimes against women.
Which I think is just amazing. Now, I just want to sort of have a look at some of the themes that you write about. Justice and injustice are really important to you. Unpick that for me a little bit.
The thing I love about crime novels, I think most women love about crime novels, is that we know by the end the bad person will be punished.
It's that resolution that readers want, isn't it?
And we very seldom get that. Even in rape cases that are tried, it's very rare in the United States, one, for the police to bring a case and the prosecutor to prosecute a case of rape. It just is something that is incredibly rare, and it has to be absolutely horrific. Usually the woman has to be dead in order for the charge to make. And so I think every woman, I certainly know, but every woman who reads my books is aware of these statistics and how it's unlikely that if something bad happens, someone will be punished for it. And sometimes the police are even the perpetrators.
Yeah.
So I really feel like it's important to talk about what rape does to a woman, what domestic violence. And the thing is, one thing that has not changed is just how hard women are on other women. And that, to me, is one of it's doing service for the patriarchy, for one. I mean, there are more of us than there are of them, so we should have a lot more control of things than we actually do. I come from a state where a woman who was declared brain dead, her family was forced to continue to put her on life support because they found out that she was 9 weeks pregnant when she came into the hospital, and they had to remove the fetus because her body was decaying. But they couldn't take her off life support because of the laws. I mean, that's just so horrific. It's actually something that happened in The Handmaid's Tale in the first few seasons. And so I'm just very aware as a woman that we are losing our rights to autonomy, to our bodies, to control over our bodies. And that was something that I did not think would happen in my lifetime. I think a lot of women felt that way. There are conversations in countries like England, where I am hearing people talk about this thing in a way that they've never spoken about it before. Even in the Netherlands, where I was just touring a few weeks ago, there's talk about restricting women's rights to reproductive care. So that kind of thing is startling. I think it makes my work more important, is because in my books I have the ability to talk about these things in the narrative frame of a thriller. And of course, if you just want to read a thriller on the beach and it's fast and gripping and shocking and twisty, that's there. But if you want a deeper meaning about what's happening in the world, that's there as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think I've got to digress here now and ask you about US politics, because most of those signs along the road in Georgia were for Trump-Vance. And as we know, that's what happened. How is that restricting creativity as well as obviously clamping down on our human rights?
Well, I think it's not Trump and Vance. It's a greater movement across the world. And I honestly think COVID just broke us. And millions of people died. We all suffered a mass casualty event. There's very rare instances in history where the entire planet, except for maybe some tribes in Brazil, went through the same experience. And we haven't really processed that. And what children went through, the isolation, the remoteness, there was a lot of anger and uncertainty. And I think that what we're experiencing now, if you look historically after the flu pandemic in 1918 and the world wars and, all of these things, we're at the precipice of this again. So I don't think it's particularly one man or one movement. It's a worldwide thing that we really need to examine and say to ourselves, is this what we want to do again?
Yeah, because trauma and grief are another big theme, particularly in We're All Guilty Here. Emma's deeply affected by multiple family losses. There's suppressed trauma there. There's collective trauma because of the original cases that happened here. And you go into how people manage grief in different ways, which is so interesting, that the way we all just maneuver ourselves around this great sadness, which might have been COVID, but could have been something else and huge and historically important, as is in this book.
Yeah. The thing about Emmy is she's a millennial, but she has a very Gen X, elder millennial experience, because she's raising a child, her marriage is falling apart, she's taking care of elderly parents, and the stress of all of those things. And then in the middle of it, I give her one more thing, which is her best friend's stepdaughter is abducted. And she makes a mistake, and it blows up her friendship in a way that is seemingly irrevocable. And it really affects her in so many ways. And we see the ripples of that through the book. But we also see her father and her mother, who made, Emmy was a quote-unquote surprise baby. They weren't expecting to raise a child that late in life. They were in their 50s, and she came along. And they parented her in a different way than they did Emmy's siblings. And
is that an echo of your own life?
It is. My oldest sister is almost 8 years older than me, and she married when she was 17, so she was out of the house very quickly. And my middle sister is only 4 years older than me, and I'm closer to her just because of the atheists and foxholes, right? But she and I had a very different experience because our parents were older, and my parents had separated by the time I remember anything. So we did have very different experiences. But I think also parents just get worn down. They were very strict on my older sister, and by the time I came along, they were just like, don't get killed. That was the lowest bar they had.
The nature of evil is something you go into, and I just wonder, I mean, yes, we could say it's a mental problem for people, a mental illness, but the calculated violence of some of the murders that you write about and the way you write about it. I mean, I noticed that on the TV adaptations of your work, the violence is actually dialed down.
It is.
Because people just can't cope, I think, with seeing that much on screen. But yet you take us there through your writing.
I do, and it's easier to do it. It feels much more visceral when you're seeing it, right, as opposed to just reading about it. And one thing I've learned to rely on as I've written more books is the imagination of my readers. And sometimes I'll get a letter or an email saying, oh, this terrified me, and I'll think, gosh, I didn't even write that. I suggested it, but your mind went to that place. And it's really just a very intimate trust I have with my readers that I can just give enough to scare the crap out of them. But you're right, on television. Well, obviously Will Trent's on Disney, so you're not going to see a lot of blood and violence there. But I love the show. I think they're doing an amazing job. Ramon Rodriguez, who plays Will, is an incredibly sexy man, so he ticks that box for Will Trent. But he also understands the heart of the character.
While we're just talking about actors playing in your shows, Toni Collette, tell me about her, because Muriel's Wedding is the best movie ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, she's just great. Like, you would not meet her in person and see that movie and think there's a lot of daylight, because she's just a nice person. She's very professional. She knows what she's doing. And she was lovely in pieces of her. I thought she brought such depth and interest to that character. And part of that is just she's so intelligent and such a thoughtful person to begin with.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about your work is that you write about victims who survive.
Yes.
We don't often hear about that.
It's very hard, because that's the messy part. And that was a very deliberate choice on my part. One thing that I didn't talk about much when I first started out, but as I've gotten older, I've decided to talk about it more, is that my grandmother was horrifically abused by my grandfather when I was growing up. And my dad had 8 strapping brothers, and they would tease her about being clumsy, or, she would have a broken bone sometimes, or a black eye, and we never really talked about it. And as I got older, I realized, wait a minute, something bad is going on here. And my sister said, we don't talk about it. And I realized that our silence never helped her. It only protected him. So, someone should have said, this is wrong, just like a reality check. And that's one thing that abusers do very well, is they create this alternate reality where the abuse is normal, and anyone who complains or says it's wrong is pushed immediately to the outside. They're very good at grooming the people around them, not just the victims. And so when I write about these incidences, I want to make the victim feel human. And even if people don't necessarily like the victim or agree with her choices, I want to say, well, she's still a human being. And a sexual assault is akin to a murder. The person you are going to be is no longer, and you have to recreate yourself. And when I first started writing, obviously in the 90s, there were lots of violent books against women, very titillating, sexualized violence against women. And it was always told through the male perspective of what she needs is a good man. And she was either catatonic and she needed him to make sweet love to her, or she was in leather pants and smoking and riding a motorcycle and he needed to make rough love to her, right? It was always this through the lens of this male being able to fix things. And in my books, I wanted to talk about the reality of it. And obviously, hashtag not all men, a lot of men, not all men. But I wanted to show how complicated it is, and that healing only comes from within. And it's something that is a very lonely road. And no matter what kind of support you have around you, I mean, support is wonderful, but it is work you have to do entirely on your own.
There's a lot of detail in your books, medical detail or police procedural detail. How do you get that right?
Well, I'm really fortunate now because I have a lot of people who will help me. From the second novel on, I've been working with a medical doctor who was a teacher, so he teaches me a lot of things. His wife is a pediatrician, and his brother works at a body farm. So
what's a body farm?
It's where they leave bodies lying around in nature to see what the decay and what bugs and what insects. So when a coroner or a medical examiner finds a body in the wild, they can say, well, based on the science, this is how long he's been there. This is how, when they died, approximately. It just tells you about the decay of bodies.
So whose bodies do they use?
People donate their bodies. They're very excited about it. There's a waiting list to donate your body to do this. Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got real experts helping
Yes.
guide you along the way. You have a book a year. That seems extraordinary.
Yeah, it does. Looking back, I think, how did I do it? But that's what the nature of this genre is. You do one a year, and every time I finish a book, I think, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. There's no way I can do another one. And then I play with my cat, or I read another book, or I go for a walk, and I start thinking of ideas, and I feel compelled to write. I think that's one thing about being a writer is you don't choose to do it.
Yeah.
It chooses you.
Absolutely. But it's not the only thing you do. Tell me about your advocacy for libraries.
Well, as I said earlier, I got my start in libraries. It was my safe place. And so as I became more successful, successful, I wanted to give back to libraries. During the economic downturn of '08, it was really important to raise money for them, and Save the Libraries gives block grants. There's also a library organization here called the Reading Agency that we've donated money to. So I just try to find systems in need. Particularly now, it's really scary because people are banning books in libraries. They're trying to shut down libraries. They're taking like hundreds, if not thousands, of books off the shelves. And that's alarming to me as an American. You know, it's seeing people so angry about one book on the shelf about a kid playing with a purple crayon. It's, what is wrong with you? It's just people, it goes back, I think, to what I said about people being broken by COVID. They're just so angry and they want to control things. And so what I'm doing is I'm finding systems that are fighting back against this and trying to support them.
Do you have any views on the Library of Congress and what's been going on there?
Well, one, it's insane because the Library of Congress is for Congress. Children cannot go in there and check out books. So I couldn't go in there and check out books. It's just for Congress. Many of them have way past overdue fines, too, I should say. So they're not just cheating in government, they're cheating the library. But it's a sacred place, and I don't understand, other than malign intentions, why anyone would fool with it. And for the very first time in its history, we had an actual librarian, an African-American woman who was revered in the library sciences, who was the Librarian of Congress, and she was amazing, and she was just fired for no reason.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? What's going to happen in America?
I have no idea what's going to happen in the UK. I mean, what's going to happen in the Netherlands? They just lost their government. It's craziness. I hope there's a sanity correction. I really do. I think that the internet, as horrible it is with amplifying insanity, I think also it might burn people out a lot more quickly. I remember my grandmother used to say to me, nobody likes an angry woman. And you can only be angry for so long before you just think, okay, well, we need to change things. And I think that's what happened after COVID. We got angry. We needed to change things. But hopefully we're at this boiling point where we're like, wait a minute, we need to get angry the other direction.
Well, there appears to be no sign of burnout for you. What's next?
I'm working on the new North Falls book, and then after that I'll go back to Will Trent and Sarah Linton.
That's amazing. And all of these places, I just have to say quickly before we go, where they're located is almost a character.
It is, absolutely. And there was a lot of world building I did when I wrote We Are All Guilty Here, because I knew it was going to be a series. So I made it big enough so I can kill lots of people. There's going to be lots of stories there. And I was able to put kernels of other characters we'll follow up on in subsequent books in the series.
And that's amazing. And can you read across your series? Do you find characters from different series in the books?
Well, I did that with Sarah Linton. She went to from Grant County into Will Trent's world. I wrote a book called Coptown, and they kind of bled over into Will Trent's world. But I think I'm just going to keep this separate. I really like the isolation of the setting and not pulling in anybody else and just letting Emmy be the star.
Well, you're a complete star. Karin, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
That's Karin Slaughter, and We Are All Guilty Here is published by HarperCollins, and it's out now. You've been listening to Meet the Writers, thanks to the production team of Steph Chungu and Lily Austin. And you can download this show and previous episodes from our website or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.